So today, Dr. Béla Teeken will be telling us more about breeding for social impact, mapping cassava trait preferences through citizen science and farming technologies. And let me just, I've got a little quick bio about Béla. Béla Teeken is the Gender, Youth and Social Inclusion Program Leader at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, or IITA, in Cotonou. His research links social science with breeding and agronomy to understand how local culture, ecology, and institutions shape agricultural innovation and social inclusion. Through participatory citizen science approaches, Béla leads initiatives that integrate gender dynamics, market insights, and user perspectives to guide better breeding investments for social impact. So welcome, Béla, and thank you for sharing your work with us today. I'll just unshare my screen and you can start your presentation.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
It works, it works. Okay, thanks a lot. So welcome everybody to this 16th webinar. I think it was already here with the 1,000 Farms project. I've been very closely involved with the 1,000 Farms project, and I have been using the tricot method with our team in Ibadan in Nigeria before the project started. So we are very familiar with all the discussions around this method. So this presentation will indeed focus on the social impact, the impact that we can generate by using this methodology, this systematic methodology within breeding. So making sure that on-farm testing data are kind of centralized, well organized, and can be linked to breeding data. Well, before it was really a little bit of a challenge where you had, as you know, many different case studies with many different participatory variety selection initiatives that were initiated by different groups, specific niches also, instead of looking at a wider picture, so that breeding could work on having impact in a more efficient and economic efficient way. So what we did in Nigeria, we used the tricot method in Nigeria. And to give it a little bit of background, here you see a product map of Nigeria, how cassava is used. Almost 60 to 62 million, I think, tons per year it is now, that is produced in Nigeria. And you see how it is used here in this diagram, where you have different swim lanes in different colors, and you can see that most of the cassava is used by small-scale processors, where women dominate enormously in the role of farming, but also especially in processing it into food products. As you know, cassava has to be processed within a few days, otherwise your root becomes useless. So this is an enormous and important value addition for a lot of women and small-scale farmers in general. You see that green line, the green swim lane, represents that kind of market segment. And then you see also, not to forget, above, like almost half of the production is used by these farmers themselves, either to feed laborers in the field, to feed themselves, or as gifts. But you can see that that's also enormously important. And because of the insecurity, a lot of these people want to use the roots for home consumption, but also for marketing. So they cannot say beforehand a lot of times, okay, this field will be for sale or for home consumption. So that's one important thing. Then we did a lot of, through the Next Gen Cassava project, RTB Foods project, we did an enormous amount of research, thanks a lot to the Gates Foundation, and also the work, the CGIAR funded funding that was part of it. And you see there were a lot of surveys done. We saw quickly that surveys were not enough. We couldn't get details from surveys. Asking people what they want is usually not a good idea. So we had to kind of move to providing options, and then asking people why they like one option. better than the other. And all this kind of research around the whole value chain, well, it formed the main product profile of focus in Nigeria, which is the processed cassava food, gari, and fufu. So in this, giving this situation, we set up a tricot where we have states represented in the southwest and the southeast, somehow covering the southern part of the country, Nigeria. And you see that we had around 640 on-farm trials and 320 per year. So this is over 2 years. You see it in 2019 and 2021 growing seasons. So we have 2-year data with the same varieties, and also a lot of farmers overlap in the first and the second year. And then specifically what we did also was, okay, we had tricot participants, men and women, but also the processing was all done and evaluated by the person who does that work in the tricot household. So it's not the main participants that does all the evaluations, and that results also into having mainly women look at the processing side. So if there was a male participant, a man participant, then usually a lot of times the processing part of the tricot evaluation was done by women. And here you can see what we did. So we had in these 2 years we had planting up to the processing into food products. So as you all know, in tricot is an incomplete block design. Every farmer has 3 varieties only in the field, and within the design of the project, the project design, you have a mix of what people already like, popular varieties, new clones, and some breeder sects. And you see that at all these points in time, we do evaluation and we ask what is the best and the worst. In general, in these 3 plots, which of the 3 is the best and the worst, and which is, we asked that for in general, and then also for specific traits. And these specific traits, they were really elicited from also the work that I just showed. For a lot, very important was the RTB Foods work, where we really got to know from farmers, processors, and consumers what kind of traits are very important to evaluate and what makes sense to them in a language that they can understand. And you see, before harvest, we had the overall impression at each time point, but also after that, we asked for specific characteristics of the crop to also rate the 3 plants on which one is the best and the worst. And you see that after harvest, we have quite a lot of things. You cannot all read that in this short time, but you see that we even have a quality evaluation after preparation and also after storage, because after storage, you see that some color changes are becoming more prominent. We saw that from the RTB Foods work. So, and then you have a final evaluation when the people have experienced all the trials, and then they can make a choice. They had kind of 3 pupils in their class, so to say, and after having these 3 pupils in their class, from the planting to the product processing, they could kind of decide, okay, well, this is for me the best variety, and this is the worst variety. So you get your final evaluation. Then we asked also from all of the tricot participants, we did a survey, a rural household multi-indicator survey that has household demographics inside. We have food security and hunger indicator, household dietary diversity, and some of the poverty, probability of poverty indicators also inside. Another thing was also selecting the tricot participants. We just didn't go random and then get all the socio-economic data and hope that we are on target. No, we did really focus group discussions in each of the communities to know also what are the local relevant social groups. No? You have certain social groups that are known to be better off and less better off, which are much more important often than the general demographics that you collect. So we did that and made sure that people who had expertise within these groups in cassava, because it was really important also to make sure that all the people that that participate have good experience in cultivating and processing the crop. Because if you're not dealing with experts, you don't tap into a community of practice that they have, and then your data will be less articulated or not usable. And here is an example how we did that in local communities. Who was better off, who was less better off, what kind of groups are there, what do they do, and we made sure that they were included if they had cassava expertise. Selection of lead farmers was also very important. These are really important things of the tricot, because which kind of people you select determines your data quality. So, and also the setup, of course. So here we worked with lead farmers. So in each community had 10 farmers, and they were led by a lead farmer. And you can see here the man in the orange shirt is a lead farmer looking at a tricot participants field. And these lead farmers were all kind of democratically chosen by the farmers. So we chose the farmers first, and then the farmers could kind of deliberate if one of them would be the lead farmer, or they choose another person in the community that had leadership acumen, and this was very important so that we don't introduce another institution in the community that will kind of only work in relation to our objectives, but it's also co-owned. When we did this all with ODK, we collected the data through the lead farmers. Everything was in the format of the ODK tablets, but also printed in a guide so that really people co-own the data, so that they can always look back what they did. Now, if you put it in a tablet and you send it away, it's not very tangible. You cannot kind of discuss it in your family or whatever. You cannot see what you've done. So that was very important. So then I'm going to the analysis. We can talk a lot more about the setup, but because of the time of the seminar, I will go straight to the analysis. So what we did is, the first step we did is we looked at all the social demographics that we had, everything from the RHoMIS and all the other social demographic things as they are listed here. And we kind of used that independent from the data. We kind of made clusters. So what farmers, so-called farmer styles. And then the next step was then to see, okay, what are those typologies that are coming out? So a narrative to describe the clusters. And then for each cluster, we would analyze the data. What kind of varieties do they specifically like, those different within these different clusters, but also what are the most important objective of the tricot was what kind of traits, what kind of specific traits drive the adoption apparently in choosing the best or the least best variety. And then step 3, we use a likelihood ratio test to compare variety rankings between farmer segments and identify the traits as significantly different shade preferences. No, I'm now a little bit strict on this P001 to make it all a little bit, for this seminar, a little bit clear. You could also put 5 and you get more traits. So what here you see the clusters. So this is a result only based on the socio-demographic characteristics of the farmers, and you see that if you do a PCA analysis, you see that the following as listed here, those socio-demographics were kind of important in distinguishing the clusters. And you see that the gender of the tricot participant is very important. And also who did the processing in the household. Was that the person, her himself, or was it somebody else? And that follows the gender roles along the value chain. And then also we see here gender male control was also important. So you see that the task and processing are pivotal in distinguishing farmer styles, customer segments, but more social dimensions play a role. If we are now going for the different clusters, the 3 different clusters, so cluster 1, what was cluster 1? You see these are more commercially engaged and selling of fresh roots. So they are more interested in high yield and selling out fresh roots. They don't really, they give the processing to someone else, and they don't really care so much about the quality. It's more about having a lot of things to sell. And they tend to have higher food security and economic stability. So this is kind of there. And then you can see here that the traits that influence the final preferences, you can see that there are relatively more stress on harvest traits. But of course, EBA quality, final food products are still very important, but you can see relatively that you see more stress on harvest-related yield traits. If I'm going to the cluster, and you can see here also within that cluster how the different varieties performed, and you can also see which one have been released, which were earlier released, and which were land races. And you can see that we didn't really focus on this segment, because you see that the recently released varieties didn't do so well here, and they had a kind of particular preferences for certain varieties. But we see also that it's kind of scattered. They are not so picky. It's more about really high yield, seeing high yield, and that's what they are interested in. If we are going to the cluster 2, which are really dominated by women-dominated farmers, focused on value addition, here you see that they do most of the processing themselves, and 89% of the time. And household composition is moderate size, food security is relatively stable. So this is really the pure value addition, hardcore processor people who are really for that, going for that market, and which is also, and we see also that they, from information, that they set the quality for the whole value chain, even if the routes that they would receive from the first group, so to say, they will judge them and might not like them so much. So then for the third group, or for this within this women-dominated processors group, you also see how the varieties performed, and you see here the key traits. So only the key traits that make real significant difference between the clusters are mentioned, and you see that here the recently released varieties like Obasanjo 2, Game Changer, and Baba 70 are kind of spot on. Those 4 or 5, there's not the best is maybe Obasanjo 2, but of course statistically there's not so much difference. You have to, this is quite a lot of varieties. This was done more earlier in the breeding stage with a lot of different varieties that are not necessarily the best in the breeding program. It was really there to create diversity. But we also had, of course, some very good varieties that were included, and they were also later released based on this information. So you see those red ones there. And then you have another cluster which are more vulnerable to resilient farmers. I would call it the hustlers, the people who do cassava cultivation. They put some cassava out because they know it's a resilient crop, and they don't care so much about maintenance, and they, because they have a lot of other things to do. They have also cattle, and they do other things. So here you see that there's a more random, less focused trend within trade preferences. And here you can see also that the released varieties are not even Game Changer in this case was the least liked. We don't know why, but there's also one, Baba 70. We see that Baba 70 is really a kind of addressing the two. It addresses this farmer profile as well as this one, and that's also very good, of course, to have that. But as we know, our major focus was on this second cluster. So what can we take? What are the main takeaways from here? So we see that trait preferences and variety preferences are largely determined by the focus on value addition, and not. No, if you are focused on value addition and food quality, you have another preference than if you are only for the root sale. And there is a reason, as I said, I wanted to stress it again. It's very important to realize we focus on that processing part, because those people set the qualities for the whole value chain, and even the others might profit, although because most of them will not have seen the performance so much of the processing in depth. So gender roles within cassava value chain play the major role, but other social dimensions also contribute. And then the third point, I've already highlighted that. And then we see that the recent released varieties perform well in segment 2, which contributed to their release. This, of course, it's not only this is only 1 year data. We have to be very careful to judge varieties only on 1 or 2 year data, but they give a very good indication. We had also triangulated this with other information, as I've been highlighted before. I can go back to that slide a little bit. Here, all these activities together and then juxtaposing that to the, oh, I'm going off track here. Going to the, comparing that with the tricot, we can see that we had a real good reason to kind of release the varieties that were released, which will be Baba 7, the game changer, and Obasanjo 2. And then we have the nice thing that Baba 70 also supports vulnerable farmers involved in many activities. So what is the main takeaway from this is that the tricot can provide market intelligent information and capture emerging trends in real time, especially important in a dynamic nexus of climate and social change, instability and environmental degradation. I've got this figure here from the Gender Accelerator, which kind of highlights a polycrisis. You know, we have climate change, environmental degradation, geopolitical instability, and then on top of that we have gender inequality, which hamper a lot of the smooth functioning and well-being in the value chains. Then I also want to make very clear that this tricot exercise, which was done more early on the breeding cycle, and that is now also done for variety release. We have also varieties that are released. So this is also not just to get data from people, it's really also a building of corporations, no? A building of community of practice and trust with the people, because only then do you get very good data if you have people co-own this. So we made very sure that we kind of feedback all the results of the trials that we are now doing. We feedback the results and we co-design results feedback sheets, and we have very good simple representation of the results, but also people who want in the community. You have a lot of young people who are interested and they want to see all the data. They want to go into the nitty-gritties, and those people can also be kind of champions in co-owning this process of citizen science. And this also provides a lot of opportunities to work and to tap into the informal seed system that is very important within cassava. And here, to conclude, I have some very nice quotes from a presentation by Tessie Madou that she gave during the CGIAR Gender Conference in Cape Town earlier this month. And she did, together with her, we did actually a research on looking at what the impact of tricot is. How do people feel about being part of a citizen science project? And I think the citations that are here on the screen are very, very spot on. I have to also say that, of course, these data, we can also kind of do groupings based on the data themselves, of course, the tricot data themselves, and then look at how specific social segmentations influence different trait preferences. We've been doing that for quite a long time, and it didn't give a very clear picture. It's a little bit, haphazard, like, okay, we have this small factor contributing a little bit, but we will also do that, and this will result in comparing this approach together with another approach that kind of segments the tricot data itself by the social segmentations, and compare the two results and conclude on what is really needed and what is the best way to go for this analysis. So here's some acknowledgement of all the people that have been actually directly or indirectly contributing to this work. it's not only the people who set up the tricot, but it's really important to acknowledge all the next-gen cassava work, all the RTB foods and RTB breeding work that has informed insights about this. So especially in formulating the specific traits that speak to farmers. Now you're not at each evaluation moment going to ask things that people don't understand or not co-own and not because they will not be able to rank those preferences. So with that, I want to thank you all for your attention. If you want to see how tricot in cassava breeding came into being and how it was organized and also used as a plateau for social science research, gender research, more qualitative gender research, you can follow this QR code and you can look at a YouTube video. So thanks a lot for your attention, and the floor is open to questions, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Béla. That was really interesting and thorough. It's great to see that so many people have been involved also in this project. I think that you've done them proud presenting today the results. We've got lots of claps. So yeah, on your React button at the bottom of the screen, you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, if you have a question for Béla. So the floor is open for questions.
Shall I stop sharing? Otherwise, I cannot see. I have one screen here only, so
Yeah, probably. Yeah, just go to your webcam. I think that would be better.
I turn on the camera, you mean?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, turn on your camera. You don't have to stop sharing
It's
at this
on.
point, but yeah. Yeah, we see you now. Any questions or comments for Béla? Let me see if there's any in the chat. Yes, I've got a question from Gary Atlin. How are the data being used in advanced and release decisions?
Yeah, okay. That's probably one of the most important things. Yes. So these data will actually presented during the product advancement meeting, next to the data that came from the consumers. We had quite a lot of consumer testing on certain advanced clones. We had participatory processing data. So all these data were kind of integrated and put together, and then compared, of course, to the multi-location trial data of over all the years, and yeah, those varieties that kind of performed very good or optimal everywhere, so to say, those were kind of chosen. So this was actively used, this information, in the product advancement meeting in the cassava breeding. The called product advancement meeting, that specific one took place, I think, in NRCRI, where people from IITA and NRCRI came together to have a meeting and discuss it. No, it is not a metric. You cannot say, okay, we have the breeding data from the multi-location trials, we have consumer testing data, and we put it in a matrix, and then we push a button, and this is the best one. No, it's really a discussion, an interdisciplinary discussion, and that's what we are also now setting up in the RTB breeding project, like to have that in all the RTB crops and beyond, and all the major crops of IITA, that you have strong presence of these multidisciplinary people of all the disciplines involved at the products advancement meeting, and that they are also involved in from the beginning. And here it's really important that the NARS are really present, because we have ideas in IITA, CGIR, we've done things, but we have so many expert opinions and insights that are so important and that come from the national institutes. So those meetings, we are looking for formats to set them up and make sure that everybody gets a right to speak, and that there are protocols for data compilation, to have everybody on board, so that we make a really inclusive decision for breeding investment cases, so to say. What kind of varieties have the highest potential to create the social impact that we are supposed to create, as being a public breeding institution, which doesn't say that we are not addressing also the industry line, because that is equally important, but it's kind of more easy to kind of find varieties that are very good for that line, because it's more controlled, and it's we are working with demand creation trials to IITA Go seed. So there's a lot of that also going on, where varieties are evaluated, and those data are also put in the product advancement meeting. So we are not only having this main focus, but we are also have an industry that we have to how do you say, to support, because if there's bigger companies where also smaller scale farmers would be able to sell roots to, that is also a trickle down process. If there's more markets for industry, then that can also trickle down to the small scale processors. So it's not only this specific pipeline, but it's as you saw from the product map, it's the main pipeline. That industry is growing. So, and everything that is growing should be needing attention from the breeding program, because it indicates a future trend, of course.
Okay, Béla, let's go on to, we've got quite a few questions. Let me go to Adani Tufa. You can unmute and ask your question, and then we'll go to the questions in the chat. So go ahead, Adani.
Thank you, Béla, for a nice presentation. And the question I have is, now mostly the breeders, they go for one blockbuster, the variety that really gives the highest yield. But when you do this kind of analysis, farmers may have different choices, and maybe you may find 30% of the farmers choosing one variety, the other 30% another one, the other 30% maybe another one. And now you may be having 3 or 4 varieties that you may suggest, but the breeders may not be comfortable with. How does this work? And it is like, when it comes to choice, because of so many circumstances, a choice might be, people might be choosing a certain variety because of some reason. Yield may not be the only thing. And how really this work is important for breeders to make decision. That is I think the most important thing. Thank you.
I know that's a very good point, and we all know that genetic gain is mostly yield, but of course genetic gain can be formulated in a lot of different ways. And we know also from the BPAP evaluation that we had, which does a kind of audit in breeding programs to see how it's all functioning. They also said, well, indeed, in a lot of cases, maybe yield is not second rank, because we need to really have the people adopt the variety. So it has to be a much more holistic thing. And I think that's this research and of this tricot also shows that. And this kind of analysis, it will soon be kind of automated. So it will not be very precise, of course. You will not have those, but at least you will have standardly integrated some of these social things. And then you can say, okay, what is my objective? No, the BPAT has been saying it as well. What you really have to focus. Where do you want to create impact? And if we want to create most impact among those medium and small scale processors who set the quality characteristics for the value chain, then that is a choice. And then you can also say, okay, now then, okay, Baba 70 or Game Changer, those ones, they are good, and we take Baba 70 also because it's also serving another pipeline, which is the industry, and then you have two varieties. And I think this really shows that we can. It's not about breeding for each specific ecology in Nigeria or in West Africa. It's really looking at, okay, we include a lot of people, and what are the cross-cutting varieties that kind of address those challenges by small-scale farmers and processors and women and all that. So I see this as a kind of very good way to come to blockbuster varieties. It's not by doing some small studies in every corner. It's really in kind of pulling it all together and then looking at varieties. You might indeed see that you have, well, okay, one variety performs better and another likes it a little bit less. But from this analysis, we see that we are, the choice was not that different, because if we are not looking only at tricot data, we are looking at multi-location trials that have been done for years and years. And that's why it's so important to also add this to it and do this regularly within the brooding program, so that you get more insights and formulate genetic gain also in the liking, or in how much people really like and want to adopt those varieties, which is very important, and which is kind of an index that comprises yield, but also a lot of other factors. And I think if we move to that direction, then I think adoption will also be much faster. And of
Great.
course,
Okay,
there's also
Béla.
the argument that has been made within cassava breeding that we have to split the breeding program into more regional focus, so that you can make even more additional value, create additional value for your new variety, which is also a very good perspective. So then you have maybe tricot in the north and the south of Nigeria, for example.
Béla, I want to go to, we've got quite a few questions on the chat. So I'll go to the first one from Jesse Sami. Asks, how does the tricot method compare with the mother-baby approach for on-farm trials?
Okay, very good question. We started actually with mother-baby trials. Now, before the 1,000 Farm project was there, we started doing mother-baby trials. Why? Because we went with surveys into the field. We saw that people didn't know what to really say. What do you want to see in a good variety? What is specific? People wanted to see. It worked much better to give options to people. So we started with mother-baby trials. The very difference is that you there have a mother trial where that is also usually a farmer researcher managed. And then you have the baby trials that are managed by the farmers. So we did that, and we structured it a little bit like a tricot. It was also kind of incomplete block. But then if we looked at the results, we saw this is not representative enough. Now, if you want to have some good data coming from those baby trials, you need more baby trials. And if you with so many baby trials, you can leave out the mother trial, or the multi-location trials will serve as your mother trial. You see? So that's how we came to it. So what is the major difference? With mother baby trials, you have just less trials, I would say, and it's the tricot trials are actually a scaled mother baby trial approach, I would say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah,
Have
perfect.
much more participants, so your statistic power will go up. And there's a whole discussion in, okay, there's so much variance because every farmer does it differently, and we probably have to insert some kind of agronomic prescriptive package where farmers can choose from, okay, you participate in a tricot, what do you usually do? And then you have kind of different packages of agronomics that you can sign an agreement with them that they will do that. And then maybe the tricot can even become more powerful, but that's another discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Béla. You ready for the next question on the chat? It's from Mirjam Shap. Asks, how did you generate the list with traits being evaluated? Are they use generated? Did you manage for different social characteristics when generating them?
So you're asking, okay, how did we decide what traits are evaluated at each time point from between planting and food processing? Well, this was based on survey work, as I've been survey work on what people look out for in a variety, what they find important. You know, we've been doing surveys where it comes out that women like canopy coverage, plant architecture. They care, of course, for a lot of other things. And then especially the RTB Foods project gave us a lot of insights on what women processors look out for with regards to quality. You know, the moldability of the final product, the color of the product, texture and color became very important. We really saw that certain varieties had a texture and color problem. So such a variety is not something to advance. And based on all that work, we kind of decided, well, what kind of traits are important for the farmer at the different time points. And of course, you make a choice based on that information, and then like that you make also sure that the farmer understands the trait that he or she is evaluating. So that's how it was a kind of compilation of all kind of insights, and that determined what traits we evaluated at each time point.
Okay, thanks very much.
Which doesn't say what we also have is also the why, you know, over the overall, what do you like best and worst at the different time points? There's also a why, and sometimes people come up with traits that were not asked for. So there's also the enormous potential in tricot to kind of elicit new traits, new things that are emerging, and with the AI tools that we're now developing within the 1,000 Farms project, we'll be able to also kind of assess those data quickly to see if there are new traits coming up that determine the final choice that people make after having experienced them in their fields.
Mm-hmm. Yet another benefit from the tricot approach. Let me just go on to the next question from Kibrit. He asks, is there a platform to share those findings? The findings countries in need of particularly, sorry, I don't really understand that question. Is there a platform? Is there a platform to share the findings in drought affected areas?
But the findings that have been here, that we have been generating, or you mean if you have insights that you want to, if there's a platform to share them, you mean?
Let me just ask Kibrit to unmute and clarify
maybe you can
his question.
stop here, because this seems to be a very important question.
Yeah. Kibrit, are you there? I see that you're still there. Can you clarify what you meant in this question? Okay, it's
I
not.
might guess what he talks. But of course, all these data we have climb up. No, the climb up is kind of why you design the tricot trials and where the data gets stored, and there are also linkages to breed base and the new system by CIMMET, so that integration is possible, and there are linkages in those breeding things to go to these data. So yes, that should all become open source, so people can assess those data there. And if they themselves generate data, of course, if they didn't do the tricot where they have data there, then that will be a little bit problematic. But if it's tricot, then we can, of course, they're all designed, and the data are collected and on the same platform, and the project should be ideally visible to all.
Okay. I've got one last question that's from Natalie Oberson. What were the main tasks of the lead farmers? Were the trials planted and harvested by the farmers themselves or by the lead farmers?
No, it's a good question. because of the particularities of cassava. No, cassava is not something you cannot create a package and kind of keep that, and then when you want to give it to a farmer, you give it, and then the farmer can decide to plant it with his own, like it's often done with grain crops, because the stems are kind of perishable. And if you want to do a good study on evaluating the varieties, you don't want to create so much variation there. So what we did is we created all these packages on station. The material was kind of multiplied in different stations in the country, so to create also a kind of minimal distance from getting those stems to the farmers. And then the staff of IITA, NSCRI, we went into the field and then planted it with the farmers. So the farmers planted it with we kind of made sure that the tricot trial was in a kind of a good shape, that we make sure that it's kind of comparable, no? So that not one has a spacing from 2 by 2 meters and the other 1 by 1. So that was kind of a little bit uniformly managed, but it was always put in the trial where the farmers also had their varieties. The tasks of the lead farmer, the lead farmer collected the data. So the lead farmer went to that group of 10 farmers to collect at each time point after planting. They went to collect those data, and they were written on in that book that I showed, in that handbook. And then those data, a lot of times the pages were photographed and then entered by us, or the people did it themselves. That depended on the skills of the lead farmer, because we really assured that the lead farmer had a good, a good leadership acumen. And sometimes the lead farmer was not so well with mobile phones, and sometimes then we had a son helping out to do the work, or in another case, photos were sent in and we could easily also enter those data. So the lead farmers circulated over those 10 plots in their community to get the data. So they collected the data. And these people were community, most of the time were community members. In other countries, it might work also with extension officers that do that job. But in Nigeria, it worked best to work with community people in the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's very clear. Just wanted to ask if there are any other questions from the floor. I've got a couple more coming into the chat. People aren't really wanting to raise their hand and talk today, so I'll do it for them. That's fine. I have a question from Trimore. What is the estimated time frame for evaluating the variety with the farmers, and when can we expect it to be ready for release?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So we have indeed, for example, in Nigeria, this is now a method that is accepted as a method for on-farm testing for variety release. As you know, when you do your on-farm testing and you have your DUS distinctive trial and everything that has to be done, when you submit those data, it depends, of course, on how effective the variety release committee procedures are, how often they organize variety release sessions. But ideally, when the tricot is over, when you do your own farm testing, it should, of course, this is a learning process, and we are all the things get optimized and everything, but this should be able to be done within a week. You could have all the data that you need to after the whole thing is completed. So that's, yeah, but if you ask how long it takes to work with the farmers, of course you have to kind of prepare, you have to leverage on relations of trust and put quite some time in making sure that you have the right people to work with. That takes some time, and then it takes the time of your crop cycle, of course, because you go from planting up to harvesting and then food processing, and then, well, then I say after a week, you should have all these data ready, and specifically if you are going to also for this integration of AI, where we go to the qualitative reasons why people choose and all that, then that should all 1 or 2 weeks should be, that's the target. No, we have been developing this system, 1,000 farms climb up system, together with different crops, with RTB and all this. All these insights have really contributed to making this system as efficient as possible. A lot of critique on the tricot is that it should be, it is, you say it's all very costly. That depends also on how you organize it. If you really say, well, we have to be really representative, we have to have villages that are 20 kilometers apart and all that. Of course, that's going to be expensive, and that's also what a normal on-farm testing is not doing. But we can majorly improve it by kind of looking at clusters of different farmers in different regions, and we see that then the costs go down and not absolutely not more as the normal on-farm testing. But as this was a learning phase, of course, people didn't know what to do, and so then, of course, in the beginning it was quite expensive, because in the beginning you want to monitor, you want to really see what is happening. But as this gets more digitalized, we will have photos from the fields, and we can have from the whole from the beginning to the end, so you can have a lot of efficiency gained. So that's an answer to your question.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, Béla, if you can. You've been doing really well answering all of these, and they're pouring in, and I'm afraid that we only have a few minutes. So I'll just ask last one, and then for the other ones, maybe people can get in touch with Béla directly by email. I'll put his email address in the chat. So the last question is from Karasawa. Do you make a selection of different environments to start the experiment?
Absolutely, yeah. We went specifically into states that were known to be very active in cassava production and processing. This could be seen maybe as not a very inclusive approach, but it was, because we focused on really where were, I mean, the major production and processing are those small scale people. No? So what we did is to look at the states where we had the largest, where they were among the largest cassava processors and production. And we made sure also that we had the forest region and the derived savanna regions covered. So this is very important in a tricot, and there you also have to choose. If you have more than 2 ecological zones, or 3 or 4, you have to decide, well, do I do one tricot? But if you do one tricot, you have to have many more participants, because to get your statistics there, you probably need more people to go within your data and see articulation. But if you have really 2 different agroecological zones where you have 2 different product profiles, it's really important that you do your thing within the same product profile. So you're not going to mix, for example, for cassava, you're not going to mix varieties that can be boiled and eaten, that you're going to mix those with those focused at the processing, the more bitter varieties that have cyanide and that need processing and that usually yield more. Those ones you're not going to mix them in a tricot, because it will not make a lot of sense, because they just serve different purposes. So it's agroecology, and also looking at the final product. What is the final food product, or the food products? Because you have a lot of times you have, of course, multi-purpose. But in cassava, for example, there's no multi-purpose on those that large part that is being processed, because these are, they are bitter varieties. They cannot be cooked, and if they can be cooked, it's dangerous, because you have cyanide in, so you have to absolutely avoid that. So you have to work within the product profile, which is linked to your agroecological zone, but it's mostly also what kind of what market is it serving? No? Is it home consumption, so boiling and eating directly? That's one thing, or is it processing for the market? So you have a product that you can keep and market. Or is it another one? Is it biofortification, for example? And biofortification can be within, of course, the processing or within the boil and eat. That's another thing. And within the boil and eat, you see that it's, of course, the vitamins, the carotenoids do their work better than in the processing, and you have those things to think about. So, no, very important. You cannot just set up a tricot. It's really looking at market segmentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much, Béla. I know you've got to go on to another important meeting. We're at the end of the hour now, and there are some questions outstanding in the chat. So the people that did not have their questions answered, please, if you could connect with Béla directly, I put his email address in the chat, and you can have a further discussion with him about this. But just to finalize, I wanted to, Béla, if you could unshare your screen. I want to share mine one more time. Yes, thank you. You've got some thumbs up coming from here and there. Yeah, and I just wanted to remind everybody, oops, that's the chat, that yes, you can find all of the recordings for this. Well, this webinar will be online in about a week's time, and then all previous webinars are on the community.thousandfarms.net. That's our community of practice website. You could also continue discussing with your colleagues about tricot on the community website. And then, yes, with that, I just wanted to thank you all very much for joining us today. And thank you very much, Béla, for sharing your research and for everyone's contributions, questions, and comments. And we look forward to seeing you for the next webinar, which will be in a couple of weeks. So thank you very much.